Have you ever had such an amazing immersive experience, whether a theme park attraction or an interactive display of some sort at a museum? And you've been so awed by your surroundings that you've wondered, how did they do that? Well, there are people and companies that work in experiential marketing to ensure that the guest is fully immersed in the environment. And they do this with visual elements, sound design, maybe even smoke or pyrotechnics, and even scent to transport guests into another world. And it all starts with a purpose, a story. Stick around and learn more about how it comes together as we welcome the Chief Innovation Officer at Storyland Studios, Matt Ferguson, to this episode of the Marketing Chief Podcast. Welcome to the Marketing Chief Podcast. I'm your host, Rob Collins. Before we get started, if you'd like to watch this podcast and not just listen to it, head over to our website at marketingchiefpodcast.com and click on the Episodes tab, or search for Marketing Chief Podcast on YouTube. Today, I'm really privileged and pleased to have the Chief Innovation Officer at Storyland Studios join us on the Marketing Chief Podcast. Welcome, Matt Ferguson. Matt, how you doing today?
Good, Rob. Great to be here, man.
Thanks for coming on. I'd love to know more about Storyland. I've been in the experiential marketing arena for quite a few years. I'm aware of Storyland, but it seems like recently you guys have really been amping up the game with your hire, with a new executive creative director hire. Tell us about what Storyland Studios is all about.
Yeah, at our core, we're a storytelling company, and we recognize that as humans, we're just wired to receive stories. So we like to say we tell stories in three dimensions, and those three dimensions are strategic, digital, and spatial. So strategic is your brand story, who you are as a company or an organization. Digital is anything from websites to apps to AR, VR, anything in the virtual world. And then spatial is physical space. So we do everything from design office headquarters and immersive factory tours for companies to full-on theme parks. And so we've got this band of former Universal Studios creatives and Disney Imagineers and marketeers like myself that really any organization can hire if they want a little bit of that magic.
And what's your role specifically as a Chief Innovation Officer? Boy, that sounds like a daunting but really fun task.
I'll be leading the studio operations of our business, that strategic, digital, and spatial storytelling. We have a fabrication shop, we have software companies, but I'm really going to be leading that core professional services practice and innovating on behalf of our clients. So that'll be my main leadership role.
Wow, that sounds like a fun job.
Yeah. So far, so good. I mean, we've got a bunch of great companies that we work with, and like I said, it's not all theme park stuff. Like we do work for Disney and Universal and Cedar Fair and Hershey, a couple of your former employers, on a variety of projects. But we also work with developers that have never done any kind of theme park or attraction before, and they can lean on us for that experience. And we're working on the two from the ground up theme parks that are going up in the US, yet to be announced. So I can't really get into those, but recently it came out that we're working with a theme park called Ghost Town in the Sky that has been closed for 10 years. It's in the Smoky Mountains of North Carolina, and we're going to revive that park. So we get to work on a lot of fun stuff. Yeah.
So for companies like a Universal or like a Disney, a large entertainment conglomerate that has resources left and right, how do they plug you in, and what service do you offer them that they don't have in-house?
Yeah, obviously, I mean, the Walt Disney Imagineering team, for example, has more than 100 disciplines in-house, and they're not leaning on us for the core storytelling as much. They usually will lean on us for fabrication work. I mean, when they're building, Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, for example, that's a lot of work to get all that rock work done, to build a Millennium Falcon. I mean, no company can, staff up enough to do all of that in-house. So then it spills over into companies like ours. We designed and built the Hogwarts Express for Universal Studios. Contributed to that beautiful land. Obviously,
it's gorgeous.
Universal Creative was the creative force behind that and the storytelling part, but but we come alongside them because we speak the same language that they do in terms of storytelling and creative excellence and design excellence. And so they can plug right into us. They've got people that they probably worked with before at Universal or Disney, and we know what to do and get it done.
And when you come up with stories for attractions or even theme parks as a whole, are you generally starting from scratch, or are you using someone else's intellectual property and kind of expanding on that and telling a different angle of that story?
Yeah, it can go either way. Like, obviously, there's a lot of built-in IP when you work on a Universal park or a Disney park.
That's
But
right.
then on the other hand, we've designed experiences from scratch that are just based on whatever the owner's vision was that they wanted to accomplish. So both are equally fun because, when you're working with existing IP, you've got sort of a place to start. And, how do we bring this movie to life in a physical space? But then, when you're starting from scratch, the world is your oyster. You can pretty much come up with anything you want. For our new Ghost Town project, for example, we're just getting started on that, but that park has a heritage to it, and we're going to have to really respect that heritage. We want people to walk in and experience everything they remember about Ghost Town. But then what people probably don't remember about Ghost Town is that there was a cool like Western town and all of the things that go with the Western town, but the rides were really kind of like carnival rides. So we're going to try to do something more with those rides than just plop in some standard rides. We're going to add some storytelling to it.
Let's talk about IP. And you've mentioned IP a couple of times. And just for those, to make sure everyone's familiar, IP is intellectual property. That is really the rights to the content. Well, when you talk about IP, how do you interact with the brand holder?
Yeah, I mean, generally those conversations start when that IP owner has an interest in seeing their movie, their story, their book be manifest in a physical space for their fans, and yet they may not physically own a theme park or have any interest in building one. And so generally those are licensing agreements to where yes, I'd like to see this thing come to life in the real world, and we're going to make a deal with you, Universal, or you, Disney. A lot of people may not think about the fact that there's a world of Pandora at Disney's Animal Kingdom. That whole movie is not a Disney property; it's a licensing agreement.
Now, it's interesting because most of your career has been in the advertising side, but you actually started at Walt Disney World back in the day. What were you doing then?
I was the head of advertising during the launch of the ESPN Wide World of Sports, and also had the opportunity to work on their integrated marketing plan to launch that. And then I moved on to the Walt Disney World brand, working on national advertising programs for the destination. And that was a lot of fun. I do have kind of this propensity for thinking about the big picture and integrated marketing. So I ended up in kind of during our planning cycle, leading integrated marketing communications for the destination as well. Just got a lot of really cool opportunities at a very young age. I helped lead a session where we came up with the brand positioning for our Walt Disney World resorts, where you could stay in the middle of the magic, never have to leave the magic the whole time you were there. So it just had some really cool assignments, and it was just a real crazy time to be there because of all that was happening. We had a major anniversary at Walt Disney World. We launched Animal Kingdom Park. I can't tell you how many new resorts we opened while I was there. And then we planned the Millennium Celebration. So it was just kind of like a grad school, so to speak, that was just packed with so many great opportunities.
I'm going to lead the witness here, and I'm not sure you know where I'm going with this.
Uh-oh.
What were your big competitive issues at that time?
Well, Universal Studios, where, Rob Collins and his crew were doing a great job of of marketing.
I didn't know if you knew I was there at that time.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I realized later that we were on opposite sides of the theme park battle during the same years.
Yeah. Yeah. You guys probably looked at us as the evil empire, and we thought Universal was the bad guy. You know, it was all in fun, and there were people moving back and forth between organizations too. But yeah, I mean, you know, Disney, I don't know what the spend is now, but Disney spent more in national advertising at the time. And then Universal would like pour a lot of resources into these three-dimensional billboards as soon as you got off the airplane to just sort of make people think about, oh, am I going to spend every day at Disney on my vacation or not? Maybe I'm going to go to Universal. And so there was this sort of friendly battle that ultimately, I think that kind of competition makes everybody better. So yeah, it was kind of fun to be a part of that. It's kind of like the Cola Wars, you know, back in the day, Pepsi and Coke.
That's right. It's funny to hear you say that about the outdoor program, because that was exactly our plan. Our plan was let Disney spend all the big money to bring people to Orlando. And then because we at that time had one theme park, just Universal Studios Florida, how do we then capture a day or a half a day of their visit? And so we just did guerrilla marketing as much as we could, kind of owned outdoor at that time. I think this was the thing that I was always told, and I'd love to hear your perspective. We thought at that time that Disney felt like out of home was too pedestrian for their brand, and so that's why you weren't in out of home. Is that at all accurate, or is that just an old fable?
By the time we got there, we were doing a significant amount of outdoor.
Okay.
I didn't work on that as much because that was more the individual parks marketing.
Yes.
And Downtown Disney did the outdoor, but I worked on the national destination advertising, and my job was to get people locked in to a Disney vacation throughout the entire stay, where they were staying on property. You know, it was too hard to go off property to go to SeaWorld or Universal. And, you know, you're locked in for tickets the whole time you're there that are tied to your hotel room. So hopefully we kept them there on property. And actually the positive benefit of that was guests who had a vacation like that had better guest satisfaction on the other end, because we took care of their transportation.
Mm-hmm.
They never had to get off on, you know, I-4 and drive anywhere. So they had a more pleasant time. So that was our goal. It was to sort of lock in that commitment to an entirely immersive Disney vacation the whole time they were there. So that was our strategy.
And it worked very well. It frustrated us to no end that you would pick them up at the airport, take them out to Walt Disney World Resort, and we'd never have a chance to grab a day of their vacation. We had more luck with obviously people along I-Drive and other areas that were staying there. Fun that we've never had this conversation about being on the opposite side at the same time. But that's really when Universal was then transforming into a resort. We were building, and I was, you know, director of advertising and brand at Islands of Adventure when that was being built, and then we were adding hotels and City Walk. So that was the first time. My last year there was the first time that we actually spent national media to drive people to Orlando, because now we were trying to replicate what you did. We were trying to replicate getting someone on property, giving them a full experience from A to Z, and basically sucking up their time so they couldn't spend time at Disney. Now, you know, everybody's going to spend time at Disney if they're coming to Orlando, but it was a lot of fun during this.
Yeah, I remember a group of us from marketing did a little benchmark competitive visit to Islands of Adventure in the first few days that it opened. And that was an eye opener, because it was like, oh, okay. I mean, these guys are using a high degree of storytelling here. This is really done with excellence. I mean, when you think about a ride like Spider-Man that still holds up today, yeah, we knew it was on when Universal opened up that second gate and started building hotels like the Portofino Bay hotel, which was beautifully done as well.
I remember walking the Spider-Man ride. I should do a separate podcast on the building of Islands of Adventure, because we literally would go into the theme park with hard hats and our construction badges, photography badges, so that we could do, get the artists for key art and photography. And I remember walking around with one of the creative guys, and we were walking through dirt tracks in Spider-Man, and he'd say, okay, right here, there's going to be a 3D screen. And then over here, we're going to hit you with heat coming down, and the ride is going to spin around, and just fun memories. But you're right. I mean, I think they upped their game and at that time, and Orlando has benefited, I believe. Boy, at that time, I want to say maybe 40 million people came to Orlando annually, visitors, and that's more than double now.
Yeah, you bring back great memories for me, because one of my favorite things that I did at Disney was just to be in lockstep with the Imagineers during that early design phase of something that was coming out. And I remember walking the grounds of Animal Kingdom before it came out, and hearing the presentations from, now Disney Imagineering legends like Joe Rohde, just sort of walking through what this is going to be. And so then our wheels in marketing would start churning. Okay, how do we tell that they've created a great story here? How do we tell the ongoing story to people that have short attention spans, while they're watching TV, or now today, scrolling through the social media? You have to figure out how to boil something as massive as that down into something simple. And, for Animal Kingdom, we knew the danger was people are just going to think it's Disney's making a zoo. And we're like, no, this is not a zoo. In fact, one of our TV spots was using the African word "natazu" to explain
Very clever.
But our underlying positioning for that was, this is the imagination of Disney gone wild. You're going to see real animals, but they're going to be in like real settings. You're going to feel like you're in Africa. You're not going to feel like you're walking into a theme park. It's going to feel real, and just seeing those ideas unfold. That was just such a very special thing about being at a place like Disney or Universal.
And that really is the challenge for marketers that we both had during those days. You will spend hours and days and weeks and months talking to the creative geniuses behind these rides. How do we take that massive information and create relevant marketing messages to get people to come visit? You're never going to be able to tell the whole story. You're never going to be. So it is those nuggets. I love that. I'd never heard that before. Disney Gone Wild. I love that. We used to think about, because Disney was the and still is the iconic brand in Orlando, we used to think about, how do we attract guests and differentiate ourselves from Disney? At that time, Disney did not have as many roller coasters and thrill rides as we did. We used to think about it as, Disney is the place that you take your child and you hold her hand, and you hold your little girl's hand, and you see her awe and wonder as she looks at Cinderella's castle for the first time. And there's nothing on this planet that can compete with that. And we'd be foolish at Universal to try to compete with that. You can't. Our thought and our theory and our brand positioning, that wasn't ever a consumer communicated brand. This was more internally how we thought about it, was Disney's a place you go for your children, and Universal's a place you go so you can experience it with your child, with your teenager. And so that gave us a little latitude to be a little more on edge, a little more teen, a little more brash, maybe a little bit.
Yeah. Well, and they've gone back to that strategy. I don't know if you've seen some of their recent work.
I have.
But it's kind of like they're positioning it as, now that your kids have outgrown Disney, it's time to go to Universal. And I think it's smart, because Disney has amped up the thrills a bit, but it still doesn't compare to Universal when it comes to the IP that they use and the thrill element of some of the rides.
And if you're just joining us, we're talking to Matt Ferguson, the Chief Innovation Officer at Storyland Studios. If you'd like to watch this podcast, head over to our website at marketingchiefpodcast.com and click on the episodes tab, or search for Marketing Chief Podcast on YouTube. So Matt, you went from theme park world into the advertising world and had 20 plus years, really going up the ranks of advertising and then becoming managing director, I believe was your title, right, at Mower. Talk a little bit about that side of the business.
Yeah, the advertising agency business is a lot of fun, and I had done it for a little bit before I went to Disney, and actually for Price McNabb, the agency that I came back to. But the thing that I did miss about the agency world was being able to work for such a variety of brands. Over my almost 20 years with Price McNabb, which eventually merged with a larger company and became Mower. I felt like I had 100 plus jobs over that time. There was so much variety because we got to work with so many different types of clients. And Disney was probably the best corporate marketing job I could have had in terms of variety because of all the things that we got to work on, from sports to theme parks to resorts, but you're still working for one brand. And so, I really did enjoy that previous experience of diving in, really learning about a company and then figuring out how to tell their story. And so now I can go to a party and talk 5 minutes on almost any subject because, I've dived into these businesses and learned about them. So that's just one of the fascinating things about advertising that I love. And then we were more of an integrated marketing agency. So yes, I worked on TV commercials and all of the typical advertising, now social media. But really, we did branding for clients. So we got to figure out what their core branding story was and tell that. And then, everything from advertising to PR to immersive experiences. So that variety, it was just amazing that you can have in the agency world.
You really get exposure to a lot of different verticals that way, a lot of different, honestly, management styles of different companies. What do you think makes a good, strong advertising, no matter the vertical? What are the tenets of things that make a good communication message?
Yeah, I mean, it really does come down to the core story. You better have that right before you start talking about that story in different media. And then from there, you have to have the mindset that nobody is sitting around wanting to see your advertising. Like we've all
That's right.
Watched a TV commercial or we've scrolled through our feeds and seen stuff that just looks stupid and you just want to keep scrolling, or you want to go get a snack, or if you're in the car listening to the radio or Pandora, you want to skip because it's just so much of it is so bad. And so I think if you can maintain that mindset that nobody wants to watch, listen, pay attention to your advertising, then suddenly you realize, okay, I have to make this creative. I have to make this interesting. I have to make this entertaining. I have to draw people in before I can just hit them over the head with the point that I want to make. You can't just like push out your message and expect somebody to receive it, but you have to draw them in with storytelling, frankly.
We recently came out of the Super Bowl, and that's sometimes thought about as a hallmark or highlight moment for creative advertising. Anything that struck you this year as particularly good or bad?
There weren't a lot that really grabbed me and that drew me in. Obviously, the one that was most talked about was the Bruce Springsteen Jeep ad.
What were your thoughts on that one?
It was beautifully done. I loved the message of hope and unity that they had, but I believe it probably fell flat with half of America because Bruce Springsteen is famously partisan. He whatever your views are, he's on the left. He's made that very clear over many years.
He's not the middle, which was the point of the spot.
And so I felt like it was a miss. Like I understand using a celebrity to grab attention, but they probably missed an opportunity to use a celebrity that just is not political either way to have that unity message. But it was beautifully done with just the way it was filmed. It was a little oasis of quietness in the middle of all the frenetic spots that typically come on the Super Bowl. So from that standpoint, it was well done.
The one that was funny to me, or that I think resonated the most, only probably because I think they, from my standpoint, they've done the best at continuing the campaign after the Super Bowl. So I've seen these ads over and over again, is the Rocket Mortgage ad with Tracy Morgan. And that's where they talk about certain is better. You know, the family comes up and says, well, I think I can afford this much house. And he's like, you think you can? Are you sure?
Yeah.
And then they have all of these different scenarios. And that one I find humorous. I find it a pretty easy brand message to understand. And again, I think they've done a really good job of continuing that messaging post Super Bowl. So it does kind of burn in your mind. I really would have to look up what some of those other Super Bowl ads were, because to your point, none of them really kind of hit me in an impactful way. As you've grown in your career, you've had some really good mentors and influences. Talk to me a little bit about Charlie Price and about what you learned from him and his impact on your career.
Yeah, Charlie Price was the founder of Price McNabb, which eventually folded into Mower. But, you know, one of the things that I learned from Charlie is he had a real empowering influence style of leadership. He wasn't the command and control type. He never micromanaged. And that was really before his time. Nowadays, a lot of studies have come out and said that the old command and control doesn't work anymore, and that influence is the leadership style that really works in the modern age. But Charlie had that even then. You know, he just had that way about him. And one of the things was he was just the consummate gentleman. You know, he kind of reminds me of that Maya Angelou quote that says, people will forget what you said, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. Charlie made people feel good. You were a client of ours, so you probably experienced that, right?
Charlie was the perfect gentleman, and he was the one who introduced us, as a matter of fact. And he just sad that we lost him this year. Your tribute to him was amazing and spot on, because he was a gentle giant. I mean, he was really a smart man who built a really great agency. But
he built that agency from Asheville, North Carolina. For those that are listening nationally, it's just kind of a cool little mountain resort town in North Carolina. And then eventually the company had offices in Raleigh, Charlotte, and Columbia as well. And then eventually consolidated everything in Charlotte once technology allowed that. But and relationships were everything with Charlie. I mean, he checked in on people on a regular basis.
He did.
You know, while I was at Disney, I heard from Charlie, you know, after I'd left. And so that when, you know, 4 years or so later, when they called and said, what would you think about coming back? I still had a warm feeling about Charlie. And he was famous for his handwritten notes. A lot of times you had to really work to read those notes because his handwriting was a bit like a doctor, but he was just an awesome guy. And I learned so much from him. I couldn't even begin to tell you all the lessons that I learned.
Yeah, he was great. And handwritten notes are very impactful still today.
They are. Yeah.
When I worked for Hershen Family Entertainment, Joel Manby, who's our CEO, talks often about how Jack Hershen, one of the founders, would send notes, and Joel would send notes as well. I can count on one hand the number of written notes I've received from someone I've worked for. I probably still have them all because they're impactful, because it means something when a leader can take the time to recognize your work, or recognize that you've overcome an adversity, or you've achieved some success, or that they're just behind you. Hey, we're thinking about you and we're just behind you. Those are so important. Our listeners probably don't know, unless they know Matt Ferguson, that Matt Ferguson was a Division I football player at Florida State University under Coach Bobby Bowden, one of the greatest coaches of all time. I say that very biasedly. What did you learn from from Coach Bowden?
Well, first of all, there's no bias behind that statement. It's just a fact, because he is, second winningest coach in history, second only to Joe Paterno. And then depending on how they recognize wins or not, he could be number one. He was for a while, but anyway, he's one of the best all time. The results show it. And, it was really like a leadership grad school, sitting under his leadership for 4 years. And, I was there right at the beginning of what they call the dynasty, which is 14 straight top four finishes, 14 straight years of top four finishes.
That is really crazy.
Crazy. I mean, Alabama almost caught us a couple of years ago with 8. They weren't even close, actually. Obviously Coach Bowden picked up a couple of national championships along the way.
I was at the first one.
All right. Yes.
I was at the first one in the Orange Bowl.
Awesome. But he was also kind of one of the early examples of that inspiring, more inspirational influencer, motivational brand of leadership. He wasn't a dictator. He hired great people and empowered them to do their jobs. He let the assistant coaches do their jobs. He was also an innovator, like some of the crazy plays that he came up with, and he inspired that innovation among his other coaches as well. And he had a sense of humor. So he was just fun to work for, fun to play for. And I just can't say enough about all that I learned about leadership from Coach Bobby Bowden. And he's still sharp I think he's going to turn 92 this year. Still as sharp as a tack, and slowing down a little bit, but still going out and speaking some. And he's just an amazing man. I can't say enough about him.
Okay, quick, easy answer, easy questions for you now. Agency side or client side?
Oh man, come on. It depends on
the day.
The client, I guess. But no, I mean, I've spent the vast majority of my years on the agency side, so I think that probably speaks to where I lean.
Anything that you are binging on TV now that you would recommend?
I mean, obviously WandaVision was incredible, and now we're into Falcon and Winter Soldier, being the Disney Marvel nerd that I am.
Yes.
That's keeping my attention these days.
Toughest football game you've ever played in? Oh
gosh. I mean, when we were there, our big rivalry was with Miami. Mm-hmm. And we were both usually number 1, 2, 3 at any given time. And so they were really more of our nemesis than even the Florida Gators were at the time. We beat the Gators all 4 years that I was there. So
very nice.
Miami.
Very nice.
And I like to tell my kids that my senior year, when Miami and Florida State took the field, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson was on one side of the field and your dad was on the other. And by the way, we weighed the same amount. I don't know what happened to me versus him. I shrunk and he got jacked, but that's just a fun little bit of trivia there.
Most exciting sports pinnacle.
Yeah. I mean, we won all 4 of our major bowl games while we were there, and that was pretty cool. Fiesta Bowl twice, Sugar Bowl on a last-second interception by Deion Sanders against
Primetime. So you played with Primetime. I didn't think I realized that.
Talk about a marketing genius.
He is a marketing genius. He's doing great things. That is Jackson State. Is that where he is?
Jackson State. Yeah. But Deion, a lot of people don't really think of this, but Deion was about the hardest working person I've ever been around. Mm-hmm. Obviously, he has a lot of natural ability to run a 4.2 40, but he got there through a lot of hard work as mm-hmm. well. And he was a lot of fun to be around. He was a great teammate. We used to cringe a little bit when he would get in front of the press and talk. Gave the other team some locker room material more than once, but he would also back it up when he was out there on the field. So can't say enough about Deion.
Matt, so great to talk to you today. I really appreciate your time. been fun reminiscing, talking about experiential marketing, just advertising in general, hearing your thoughts. I wish you much success at Storyland Studios. Hope that we can do this again after you can reveal some of your secret projects.
Sounds good. Let's do it. It's always fun to catch up.
All right. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Rob.
If you like what you hear, hit the subscribe button and you'll be notified when new episodes are posted. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Marketing Chief Podcast.